December 11th, 1942. One wave nearly erased 15,000 American soldiers beneath the freezing black Atlantic forever. Inside the Queen Mary, nobody could see the ocean, but everyone could feel something enormous approaching through the steel walls. This immersive history story begins 3 degrees away from the deadliest maritime mass grave humanity never witnessed. When the giant liner rolled beyond 50 degrees, thousands believed the next second would become their final breath alive. Some prayed silently, others vomited. Many simply froze, listening to iron plates scream like wounded animals inside darkness. Deep below them, engineers fought boiling machinery while 36 million horsepower battled the Atlantic's impossible fury alone. The Queen Mary was designed to survive warships and torpedoes. Nature nearly destroyed her within 20 terrifying seconds. Before becoming the Gray Ghost, she carried champagne, silk dresses, ballroom music, and the arrogance of peacetime luxury. Then war arrived. Chandeliers vanished, ballrooms filled with rifles, ammunition crates, and thousands of frightened young American soldiers. Every corridor smelled like damp wool, cigarette smoke, machine oil, sweat, and fear hidden beneath nervous laughter. Most on board had never seen combat. Many were teenagers crossing an ocean toward a war already swallowing entire continents. 700 miles from Scotland, the Atlantic became colder, darker, and strangely violent beneath gathering winter skies. At first, the waves felt ordinary. Experienced sailors mocked nervous troops gripping tables during every violent roll below deck. But on the bridge, officers watched the barometer collapse unnaturally fast, signaling something monstrous forming beyond the darkness. The sea stopped behaving normally. Waves struck from strange angles, slamming the liner like moving apartment buildings repeatedly. Sleep became impossible. Every metallic groan sounded like the Atlantic slowly tearing apart the ship's enormous steel skeleton tonight. In the galleys, boiling food exploded across walls while cooks slammed against counters, trying desperately to stay standing upright. Outside, the Queen Mary climbed mountains of water before dropping sickeningly into freezing black valleys below her hull. Seasickness spread everywhere. The smell of vomit mixed with tobacco smoke, wet clothing, and hot circulating engine air. Captain Cyril Illingworth had crossed dangerous oceans before, yet even he sensed the Atlantic behaving unnaturally that freezing night. 36 million horsepower drove the liner forward, but the sea kept forcing her sideways against relentless hurricane winds. Men joked loudly to hide fear, but every violent impact silenced conversations faster than shouted military commands ever could. Even the lifeboats looked helpless now, swinging violently above water cold enough to kill within only minutes, instantly. Somewhere below deck, someone screamed briefly after another brutal roll threw sleeping soldiers directly onto steel flooring together. The storm ahead stretched endlessly across the Atlantic, swallowing horizons and erasing any illusion of safety remaining aboard. Every wave struck like an explosion. Steel plates groaned so loudly many believed the hull was cracking apart already. Some prayed openly now. Others stared silently into darkness, imagining freezing water pouring suddenly through shattered steel corridors below. The Atlantic had become chaotic. Waves no longer rolled naturally. They collided unpredictably, building dangerous walls of moving water. Deep below deck, engineers fought to stabilize turbines shaking violently under pressure from the relentless storm outside tonight. Then, somewhere beyond the darkness, the Atlantic quietly began forming something far deadlier than ordinary storm waves ever witnessed. 4 hours into the storm, The Queen Mary entered water behaving more like a living predator than weather. Men grabbed tables instinctively as another brutal impact rolled through the liner like a direct artillery explosion below decks. Captain Illingworth couldn't see the horizon anymore. Ocean and sky had merged into one endless black nightmare surrounding them. Suddenly, the sea struck sideways hard enough to throw hundreds of soldiers directly from their crowded bunks instantly together. The Queen Mary leaned unnaturally far before correcting herself slowly, leaving terrified silence hanging across every crowded compartment. Experienced officers stopped speaking casually now. Something about the storm felt fundamentally wrong, unpredictable, and deeply dangerous. Beneath the hull, invisible mountains of moving water twisted unpredictably through the freezing North Atlantic currents below them. Nobody truly rested anymore. Every crashing wave felt powerful enough to finally flip the gigantic liner completely upside down. Each descent felt endless, like the ocean opening beneath them before slamming the massive liner violently upward again. Helmets, boots, and frightened bodies slid sideways together whenever the ship rolled harder against another crashing Atlantic swell nearby. Navigation instruments jittered wildly now, struggling against winds powerful enough to push the enormous vessel dangerously off course repeatedly. Cigarette smoke thickened the stale air, while nervous soldiers avoided discussing what everyone already secretly feared most. Freezing seawater blasted across exposed decks, instantly coating railings and steel surfaces with dangerous layers of slippery ice everywhere. Below deck, engineers fought desperately to keep engines synchronized, while the storm battered every mechanical system aboard continuously tonight. Some sailors had crossed oceans for decades. None remembered seeing waves behaving with such terrifying, unnatural violence before this night. Somewhere ahead, unseen in darkness, the Atlantic was quietly preparing the single wave that nearly ended everything forever afterward. Jokes died quickly now. Every fresh impact reminded men how completely powerless they truly were against nature. Lightning exposed terrifying glimpses outside, walls of moving water surrounding the ship like collapsing black skyscrapers during midnight storms. One teenager wrote his mother a final letter, convinced the Atlantic would swallow them before sunrise arrived over Scotland tomorrow. Even the gigantic Queen Mary looked fragile now, dwarfed completely by the monstrous winter Atlantic surrounding her endlessly. Then came the drop. Sudden, violent, stomach-turning enough to make experienced sailors briefly lose their balance on board during darkness. Equipment tore loose everywhere. Metal lockers burst open while heavy crates slammed dangerously through narrow, crowded passageways below deck. Captain Illingworth realized the storm was evolving rapidly now, becoming far deadlier with every passing minute aboard the liner. The Atlantic currents had collided unnaturally, creating unstable mountains of water moving unpredictably beneath complete darkness around them. Fear spread openly now. Men stopped pretending the Queen Mary remained fully under control against the relentless storm surrounding them. Waves swallowed entire sections of exposed deck, smashing lifeboats and twisting heavy equipment like children's toys during impact. Atmospheric pressure continued collapsing fast, confirming the storm was strengthening far beyond normal North Atlantic winter conditions tonight aboard. Somewhere deep inside, many soldiers quietly accepted they might never see home, family, or sunlight ever again after tonight. Far ahead, hidden within darkness, the rogue wave finally began rising from the violent Atlantic chaos beneath freezing midnight skies. When lightning exposed the wave clearly, experienced officers reportedly froze completely, unable to process its impossible, terrifying size immediately. The wave rose 92 feet above the Atlantic, towering beside the Queen Mary like a collapsing black skyscraper. Captain Illingworth ordered immediate corrections, but the gigantic liner responded far too slowly against the rapidly approaching wave. Then, came the silence. That horrifying instant before impact when thousands instinctively realized something catastrophic was about to happen aboard. The Atlantic struck broadside with unimaginable force, smashing 30,000 tons of steel sideways through freezing darkness instantly. Men slammed across corridors helplessly while bunks ripped loose and heavy equipment thundered violently through crowded compartments below deck tonight. The Queen Mary kept rolling farther, 20 degrees, 30 degrees, then, terrifyingly, beyond angles considered survivable by experienced sailors. Lights shattered instantly. Thousands were thrown into sudden darkness filled only with screaming, crashing steel and freezing seawater everywhere. Some soldiers believed the ship had already flipped completely, desperately clawing at floors now angled like collapsing walls beneath them. Massive dining tables broke free instantly, crushing everything while bodies and machinery slid together through complete darkness below deck tonight. Outside, the Queen Mary leaned 52 terrifying degrees, balanced briefly between survival and catastrophic permanent capsizing into the Atlantic. On the bridge, officers reportedly watched helplessly, convinced the gigantic liner would never return upright again after this devastating impact. Corridors became climbing walls instantly. Men grabbed pipes desperately while lockers and bodies thundered dangerously past them downward. Deep below, engineers fought gravity itself while roaring turbines threatened catastrophic failure beneath unimaginable mechanical strain during the terrifying list. Seconds stretched endlessly. Thousands waited helplessly inside darkness, expecting freezing Atlantic water to burst through steel walls immediately. 3 more degrees would have doomed everyone aboard, creating history's deadliest peacetime maritime disaster within moments that freezing night. Then, almost impossibly, the Queen Mary stopped rolling farther and began clawing herself slowly back upright against the storm tonight. Nobody cheered immediately. Most men simply lay motionless, too shocked and exhausted to understand they had actually survived. In darkness, sailors searched wrecked compartments for injured men while freezing seawater dripped steadily from shattered pipes overhead. Captain Illingworth later admitted the waves struck with such force he genuinely believed the Queen Mary was finished completely. Inside the liner, shattered glass, twisted metal, and scattered belongings revealed how violently nature had invaded human engineering. Many soldiers stopped speaking afterward entirely, unable to process how narrowly 15,000 souls escaped freezing death together. Slowly, unbelievably, the battered Queen Mary continued moving forward through the storm as pale dawn approached the Atlantic horizon finally. The Atlantic had nearly consumed humanity's greatest ocean liner, yet somehow, against impossible odds, the Gray Ghost survived another night. Morning exposed the destruction clearly now. Twisted steel, shattered lifeboats, and seawater frozen across battered, exposed decks everywhere aboard. Men emerged silently from darkness, staring around the damaged liner like survivors waking after some unimaginable nightmare finally ended. Broken bones, deep cuts, and severe concussions covered the ship, though remarkably, almost nobody had been lost during impact tonight. Sailors inspected the wounded liner carefully, amazed the enormous hull had somehow resisted nature's overwhelming violent pressure during impact. Many on board later admitted the ocean terrified them more deeply than the actual war awaiting Europe beyond Scotland's distant coastline. Long afterward, survivors still remembered the sound first, the deafening scream of steel twisting against unimaginable oceanic force during impact tonight. Experienced officers rarely discussed that night publicly afterward, perhaps because some fears remained too enormous for ordinary language entirely. The Queen Mary survived because her immense weight eventually overcame the wave's violent attempt to roll her permanently underwater. Physics alone saved 15,000 lives, mere degrees separating survival from unimaginable catastrophe beneath freezing Atlantic waters that terrifying night. Nobody on board would ever forget how small humanity suddenly felt beside nature's overwhelming indifferent power during that winter crossing afterward. The storm eventually faded away, but its memory remained trapped forever inside steel corridors and survivor nightmares afterward, aboard permanently. During World War II, the Gray Ghost carried millions safely across oceans despite constantly battling submarines, storms, and unimaginable danger everywhere. Yet one rogue wave nearly accomplished what enemy warships, mines, and torpedoes never successfully achieved throughout the brutal conflict itself. 92 feet of moving Atlantic water almost rewrote maritime history forever within only 20 unforgettable, horrifying seconds that freezing night. Imagine surviving that darkness, hearing thousands scream while the entire world tilted violently beneath your feet during complete blackness tonight aboard. The Atlantic never cared about human engineering, military rank, or fear. It simply moved according to forces beyond human control. Somehow, the Gray Ghost endured, carrying 15,000 shaken survivors onward toward war, memory, and the rest of their lives afterward. Some survivors rarely discussed the experience later because certain moments permanently alter how humans understand mortality itself forever afterward inside. History remembers battles and victories, but terror often hides quietly inside moments where disaster almost happened instead during ordinary crossings. Somewhere beneath those freezing waters, the Atlantic still carries echoes from that terrifying winter night aboard the Queen Mary forever. This immersive history story reminds us how terrifyingly fragile humanity becomes whenever nature decides to test our survival against eternity itself. Subscribe to Immersive History Chronicles for more true stories where ordinary humans stared directly into history's darkest, unforgettable moments together.